Man, I hate living in fear. I hate how it can just control my life. But you know what I love? I love how through the gospel, it doesn't have to. Hey guys, so good to be with you. I'm so happy that I can share this time with you of being able to give you the content of how to break fear. Particularly right now within our world, it can grip us, right? It can really incapacitate us and enslave us. And as you guys know, that's not the truth of the gospel. Jesus did not die for us to go back to slavery, to be ruled and reigned by fear, but to be ruled and reigned by the truth, by the gift of the gospel and our Lord Jesus Christ. And so guys, let's just go for it. Let's just dive right into the teachings on how to break fear. Okay, as we begin, we need to be able to make distinctions between the word anxiety and fear. A lot of times, guys, within our culture, we have taken these two words and just kind of use them interchangeably. But the fact is, they don't mean the same thing. And not knowing that distinction can actually hinder us from being able to truly understand what is fear. Okay, so with anxiety, there is no clear object of danger, right? Nothing's actually happening in that moment to fear or to be scared of. There's no present threat, but only possibility. Right? Possibilities of things happening that aren't good. Possible threats, possible dangers. For example, okay, so let's just say you are walking down the street and you make a left into a dark alleyway. Now, you make a left in a dark alleyway, there's a lot of possible things that could happen, right? I mean, maybe someone could jump out, right? Someone could try to rob you, pull a gun on you. Man, those are dangerous possibilities. In that moment, the person walking down the alleyway is going to be anxious. Right? There's a lot of possible dangers that could happen rather than there is a present danger in that moment. Now with fear, fear has a clear, distinct, and immediate threat, an immediate object to be afraid of, right? It's not possibility, but it's in the moment, it's happening. Danger is real. So same example of someone going down a dark alleyway. You go down the dark alleyway and boom, some guy jumps out and he pulls a gun on you. Now there's an immediate danger, there's an immediate threat. Okay, quick review. Anxiety, only in possibility. There's no clear or present object to be afraid of or a threat that's happening in that moment. Only possible dangers that could happen. While with fear, clear, present, definitive object to be afraid of. There is a threat in that moment. Anxiety, no real threat. Fear, in the moment, the threat exists. All right, cool. So as we just made distinctions between anxiety and fear, we actually have to make another distinction between proper and improper fears. Guys, distinctions are like amazing. We always need to make distinctions, okay? Without distinctions, we die. Okay, I'm just joking, but distinctions are awesome. All right, so cool. Guys, so fear first and foremost is actually a good thing. So God has given us this beautiful gift, this emotion to arise in us when there's a threat, when there's actual danger. Why? Well, for the sake of survival. Guys, life is good. Life is amazing and it should be preserved and protected. And so God has actually given us a beautiful mechanism interiorly to assist us to survive. That's proper fear. Okay, so I would hope that if like a bear, like if right now is like running at me, like a bear's coming right here, I'm like, run, get out now, run. I would hope that I would have that response. That's like a proper fear response, right? It's a proper thing. There's a bear and that can kill me and it would hurt really, really, really bad. I would hope, right? If a bear's like coming at me like right now, I would have that response. Like I would run, I would get out of here as quick as I could or lay down, play dead. I don't know, run, play dead. I don't know which one's the best thing for survival against a bear. But anyway, I hope I would have the proper response to get out of the way of the crazy present danger, right? Bear's coming, fear's gonna arise. Why? I don't know, because in the present moment, I look pretty edible to a bear that's hungry for lunch. All right, now that I have totally protected myself from a crazy awesome bear who wants to kill and eat me, let's talk about improper fear responses. Okay, so an improper fear response is taking a possible danger, something that could happen, and you actually move it into your present moment and live as if it's already happening, right? So you actually take an anxiety and you actually move it into the level of fear, right? Because you've taken and made this possibility into an actual real object. For instance, okay, so sometimes people have a fear of dying or a fear like just things are just gonna go wrong. Like they're kind of always afraid, right, that bad things are gonna happen. Now, what can happen with this is the fact that like people then just don't live their lives, right? They're kind of enslaved and they're living constantly in worry and fear and they don't take chances, they don't live their life. And what's interesting is they actually live as if they're already dead. So like when that happens, you're just always living in survival mode, which is why someone like has to feel like they have to control all these different things and it has to go this way or that way. And if it doesn't happen perfectly, man, like things can just blow up and go bad. Well, why? Because they're afraid. They're afraid, right, of something bad happening. But what's interesting is it probably isn't happening. Right? That's the whole reality of an improper fear response, right? Where you take something that could happen and you live as if it is happening and you let this anxiety, this possibility run your life as if a bear was literally running after you, as if you were dying in that moment. And so when we do this, when we take a possible danger and we move it into the realm of reality, we actually begin to give it life to control our thoughts, our actions, and even our words. And to remember this, guys, I actually want to give you an acronym for fear or an improper fear response. Okay, all right, so you ready? Don't ever, 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 ever forget this. Fear, false expectation appearing real. Like right over here, like right here. False expectation appearing real, right? A possibility, something that's not actually happening in that moment. It's false, right? We expect it to happen. We live as if like it's just gonna happen, right? So I gotta make decisions about that which is gonna happen, right? And I allow it like appears real to me, right? In that moment, right? This that doesn't exist, which I expect to happen, actually is now happening, and I experience it as real, right? That's an improper fear response. So again, false expectation that appears to the person as if it's real, as if it's actually happening, as if there is a real, definitive object or threat and danger to their lives in that moment. Okay, and now that we've been able to kind of go through that and the acronym and the distinctions between fear and anxiety and improper fear and proper fear, let's get into the actual principles to break fear and live more in the freedom of Jesus Christ. Okay, so there are 3 principles that we're gonna go over today, right? So first principle, right? Principle number 1 is we have to keep our eyes fixed and focused on Jesus rather than situations. Again, we have to keep our eyes fixed completely on Jesus rather than the situations and circumstances that are happening all around us. Now, this principle comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, where the disciples are on the boat during the 4th watch of the night. All of a sudden, they see what they think is a ghost walking on the water coming towards them, right? And they cry out, and the Lord's like, "Do not fear, it is I." And Peter, right, says, "Lord," like so boldly, "Lord, if it is you, call me out onto the waters." And so our Lord says, "Come." And what's interesting is the actual response of Peter, right? Peter gets out of the boat, and it says in verse 30, so chapter 14 of Matthew's Gospel, verse 30, it says that when Peter saw the wind, he became frightened and began to sink. Okay, I'm going to say it again. When Peter saw the wind, he became frightened and began to sink. I'm sorry. What does wind look like? Seriously, like, has anyone seen the wind? Guys, it doesn't look like anything. You can't see the wind. You can maybe see effects of the wind, but you can't actually see the wind. So what's interesting is in Matthew's gospel, he's actually saying that when Peter looked at nothing, he became frightened and he began to sink, right? When he took his eyes off of Jesus, that which was real, right? The real thing in that moment, right? The most real thing was Jesus, right? And when he took his focus off of Jesus and he looked at nothing, he became frightened and afraid. He allowed nothing, right? Some possible thing that maybe could happen, guide his actions, and he began to be frightened and he sank. This is actually why in Mark's gospel, Jesus says, fear is useless. What is needed is faith, right? Faith in the Lord Jesus who's present among us in every single situation, right? Fear is useless. Why? Well, you can't use nothing, right? You can't use that which doesn't exist, guys. So it's interesting. Peter had an improper fear response, right? He looked at nothing, right? Some possibility of things that could happen, right? And he became frightened. And he allowed that possibility to take his eyes off of Jesus and he began to sink. And what's interesting is in the next verse, the Lord grabs him and he says, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" Right? Why did you doubt, right? That I was here, right? That I would take care of you. So guys, when you're going through an improper fear response, you're going to realize really quickly that what you're probably looking at isn't Jesus, right? You're not fixed and focused on the one that's real in that moment and things that are happening in that moment, right? But you're fixed and focused on possibility. And guys, never forget this. God doesn't live in possibility. God doesn't exist in possibility. He exists only in reality, right? So when we begin to focus our eyes on things that aren't real, things that aren't possible, it's impossible for the Lord to be present there. Right? This is why we get afraid. This is why things like that can guide and move our lives more into slavery than the freedom of Jesus Christ. And so if this happens, we have to refocus our mind on Jesus. We have to turn our gaze at that which is real, not that which is possible. Right? So again, this particular principle, guys, keep your eyes at all times fixed on Jesus, right? You find yourself moving in possibilities and allowing things that could happen to move your heart and your mind. Realize really quickly that what you're looking at, right, isn't real. And you need to refocus your eyes on Jesus, the one who's the most real in all situations. Principle number 2, right? Principle number 2, guys, is God plus you make up the majority, right? Again, God plus you makes up the majority. This actual principle in regards to breaking fear comes from a beautiful story of David and Goliath, right? So this story is taken from 1 Samuel chapter 17. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of give you a background of what's actually going on, and then we're gonna move right into the particular part where we see this principle lived out in the life of David during this time. Okay, so you have the army of Israel versus the army of the Philistines. Now, never forget that the army of Israel is in a covenant with God, right? So God's on their side, okay? Now, the army of the Philistines is coming up against them, and Israel is actually really scared. And what happens is you have this one fighter, this amazing, the best fighter of all the Philistines, Goliath, this giant that comes forward, and he basically throws down a challenge. He's like, okay, I want you to bring your best men to come and to fight me. Find one man, fights me, and if they win, we'll be your slaves. But if you lose, you are our slaves, right? So challenge thrown down, and all of Israel, all the army of Israel at the time, nobody wants to fight. They're super scared. They're actually backing away. And what happens is that all of Israel's fighters in the army is focusing on all the ways that Goliath could kill them, right? They're just focused on how big he is, and he's got this axe and this crazy thing here, and he's gonna just destroy us. And now enter David. David is a shepherd boy, and he's actually coming from home to bring his brothers on the battlefield cheese and crackers, which is hilarious, by the way. So he's literally going to the battlefield to bring his brothers cheese and crackers that his dad asked him to, and he gets there and he just sees everyone afraid and crazy scared, and he's like, what's going on, right? And he actually is like, king, I'm gonna go out, let me do this. And the king's like, are you kidding me right now? You're a youth. You are small. Are you kidding me? This guy is like a crazy warrior. He will destroy you. And David, I mean, his response is first off just hilarious. He's like, I'm sorry, your servant? Right? When I tend the sheep of my father's flock, when a bear or a lion comes and grasps them, I run after and snatch it. And if this bear or lion comes after me, I just rip his jaw and kill it. Man, David is so cool. I mean, like, I'm sorry, what a crazy cool response. And the fact of like, you just killed a bear with your bare hands. Crazy. Right? Anyway, and he makes this beautiful comment right after that. And he says, and this uncircumcised Philistine, your servant, will do the same to. And he makes this one comment that actually changes the entire thing, right? So again, like I said, Israel was always focused on all the ways that Goliath could kill them, right? That his strengths, his powers, looked at his size. And what's interesting is David actually looked at the fact that, no, I'm sorry, this is an uncircumcised man who has come up against the armies of the living God. How dare he? David knew that he was in a covenant with God, which meant when he would go in to fight, he was going in with God. Goliath was the one that should have been scared. Goliath was alone, while David was with God. We see how Israel was looking at all the ways, these possible ways that Goliath could kill them. While here's David, and he's like, I'm sorry, I'm in a relationship with the Lord. I'm not alone, right? He looked at Goliath through the lens of the Lord, right? He looked at Goliath through the lens of a relationship. And it's the same thing that we have to look at, guys. When we're dealing with fear, right? Particularly improper fear responses, guys, we have to be able to look at them through the lens of God. That, guys, we are with the Lord and He is with us. That you plus the Lord make up the majority, right? And that which comes up against you has no power to be able to destroy and to beat the undefeated champion of the Lord. I mean, this is why David had so much boldness. This is why David rushed towards Goliath and slew him, right? With not only just a stone, but then his own sword. He took out his own sword and slew Goliath because he realized that he was not alone. Right? He wasn't looking at all these possible ways that Goliath could kill him and all these things that could happen. He was fixed and focused on the truth that no, I'm in a relationship with the Lord. He will never leave me or abandon me. He absolutely is going to take care of me. And when I walk into this, right, I'm not walking into it alone. You plus God make up the majority. Right? When you're struggling and focused on possibilities and things that could happen, always remember, right? Refocus your lens, right? The first one, focus your eyes on Jesus, but also now have a new focus that not only on Jesus, but the fact that He's with you and that you plus Him, you plus God make up the majority, and no possibility can ever destroy the reality of God Himself. Principle number 3, that in every improper fear response, there's contained a lie. There is some lie within every improper fear response that's actually guiding your thoughts, your words, and your actions during that time. Guys, we spoke last week about how are we to be able to battle lies, right? Listen, if this that's coming into our minds is first not in the mind of God, it should not be in our minds, right? So we have to take that particular thought captive, right? This possible fear captive and begin to recognize, okay, is this true? So here's an actual way that you guys can do this in regards to improper fear responses, right? When you guys are afraid, right? When there's a real fear that rises up against you, the first thing you want to ask is what I'm afraid of actually happening? Right? Is it real? Is it happening in this present moment? And if the answer is no, then what is happening? Right? So again, if there's a lie, we have to be able to figure out, well, then what's true? Because the only way to be able to break a lie is we have to be able to break it with the truth, the actual reality of what's going on. We spoke before about a person who's really gripped with a fear that just bad things are going to happen, right? They expect it, right? They're always living in this possibility of things going wrong. Now, if we dig a little deeper, usually what we'll find is there's a lie present there, right? There's this lie present that maybe they just have to take care of themselves because no one else is going to take care of them. Right? Maybe they don't believe that God actually loves them and is going to take care of them, right? Or if things go wrong, right, that someone's going to be there to catch them and to assist them through it. Maybe they think they're just alone. Right? I mean, those are real lies. Those are lies that would begin to form actions and thought patterns that people would have where they just would be trying to control everything, or it has to be a particular way. Why? Because they're afraid that if it goes wrong, man, they got to do everything alone. Man, that's a really, really difficult place to be and to live in that way, right? To just live kind of perpetually alone. But then what's the truth? Right? If these are those lies that are gripping a person in this particular situation, or just to think that everything's just going to go wrong and they have to control everything, well, what's the truth? The truth is, guys, that they're not alone, that we're not alone. Right? The Lord says that He will never leave us or abandon us, that He will not leave us orphan, but that He will come to us. Right? Guys, we're never going to be able to be alone, but sometimes it might feel like that, but we got to speak that truth of no matter what happens, the Lord will never leave me or forsake me. Right? Even in the reality of, man, like, well, what if it does go wrong? What if it kind of goes crazy? All right, well, do we believe that God works all things out for good? Do we believe that He makes all things new? Do we believe that God has the power of literally drawing something good and beautiful from difficult and horrible situations? Right? So again, that's the truth. Right? But if we live in possibilities, right, of all these ways in which that can go wrong, right, we begin being gripped by a lie. And this lie gets embedded in a fear response, an improper fear response that begins running our lives that's contrary to the truth and the freedom of Jesus Christ. Right? When fear then arises within your hearts, guys, ask yourself this simple question: is what I am afraid of actually happening in this present moment? Right? And if it's a no, then look for the lie. What are you afraid of? What's actually going on? Right? And then when you find that lie, find the truth that's contrary to it. Speak that truth, guys, into that particular situation. So that if that fear or improper fear response rises again, you know the truth. You know how to able to battle and to destroy that fear so that it can't run your life anymore. So that you can't be run by a possibility, but only by reality. The reality of the goodness of God and the truth of who He is and who we are, right, in the goodness of the Father's arms. And if we do that, we then begin to turn away from that goodness. We turn away from that which is real, and we focus only on those things that could happen, right? We give possibility greater power than the reality of God being with us. So guys, okay, so just a quick little recap of everything before we end this video. First principle, guys, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus. Right? Don't look at situations, don't look at circumstances, but keep your eyes on what's real, on what's actually happening versus the things that could happen. Second principle, guys, you plus God make up the majority, right? Never forget that God's on your side, right? That whenever you go into anything, right, any fear or anxiety that's coming up, guys, you go in it with the Lord, and nothing and no one has more power than the Lord Himself. Third principle, guys, within every improper fear response, there's always a lie. Find the lie. Speak the truth against it to break that fear. Because the reality, guys, is the Lord has created us for a relationship of freedom, never a relationship of slavery. Awesome, guys. That's going to wrap up our talk on breaking fear. I pray these principles and content you're able to implement immediately, and they're going to begin to bless you with the ability of experiencing far more freedom in the midst of any fear that might come up against you guys. I encourage you guys as well, go in the workbook, do the reflection questions. It's really going to assist you guys to bring everything together and those teachings to be able to be more alive and more fruitful within your lives. But guys, listen, been so much fun. Love you, miss you, praying for you. Talk to you guys soon. Blessings.